Hello there, friends and RC family. My name is Alec from High Noon Hobbies, and this time on the channel, we're going to be playing a game of crawl between the Vanquish VS4-10 Phoenix and the RC Speedy C3. If you're new to the channel, I very much appreciate you stopping by. I hope you'll stick around, watch at least this video, see if this content seems worth your while, and consider subscribing so that then I can say to you, if you aren't new here, welcome back to yet another Friday upload. This time, we are comparing, two different trucks with the same heart. See, I built my RC Speedy C3 around the VS4-10 Phoenix with the VFD Twin transmission and skid plate. That means that my RC Speedy C3 and my VS4-10 Phoenix essentially have the same heart. So, which one would come out on top if we put them head to head in a game of crawl? Let's find out in this week's video. Alright, first things first, we're going to dive into this first obstacle here with the Vanquish VS4-10 Phoenix with the Phoenix body on top. And this truck is lovingly referred to on the channel as Lieutenant Dan because when I received him from West Desert Wheeler, he did not have any legs. And so since then, he has gotten a beautiful set of new shiny metal legs from CNC Custom Wheels, and he rocks them every single day. He's got certainly got a very stout presence, very wide because of the hubs that I had to use on these CNC wheels, but I really like the look. Certainly probably a bit wide to run as a comp truck, but Lieutenant Dan is typically my kind of overbuilt trail truck that's capable of doing some really hard lines, so I don't typically end up running him through gates. And, well, you can see here that he is certainly capable of hitting some hard lines. That first obstacle, not easy by any means, and Lieutenant Dan makes quick work of it. Now, let's see if the RC Speedy C3 can keep up with Lieutenant Dan on this same line. Now, obviously, these trucks are very similar in that the heart of these two trucks is about the same. This is obviously both are on a VFD Twin transmission and a VFD Twin skid plate. Both are running the same Vanquish axles, although the C3 has the metal version of the axle housings, where the Lieutenant Dan, the Phoenix, just has the plastic housings that come stock on the VS4-10 Phoenix. But besides that, these trucks are pretty similar, at least in terms of their kind of more broad composition. Now, obviously, the platform of these two trucks is completely different. The Vanquish is sitting on the standard stock Vanquish chassis rails, whereas the C3 here is sitting on a completely custom RC Speedy chassis. Now, the C3 definitely has its advantages, particularly when it comes to durability. You can see this Lexan body is cracking at the back of it from impact, whereas the C3, I don't anticipate that titanium chassis is going to have any trouble handling the impacts that I'm throwing at it. But based on that first obstacle, you can certainly see that the ascending capabilities of the VS4-10 Phoenix far outdo that of those of the RC Speedy C3. Now, is this something that could be addressed? Most certainly. I have not done nearly enough testing and tuning on the C3 to call this a comprehensive review of its performance. This is really just completely out of the box, or I suppose upon first assembly, since it's really not an out-of-the-box type of deal, those RC Speedies. You do have to build it yourself, and maybe that's part of what's playing into the difficulties that I'm having getting the C3 to perform in this instance when comparing it against the VS4-10 Phoenix. You see, the The RC Speedy C3 is really built to, or is designed to, have the end user or the person who's assembling it really take their time and figure out what is going to work best for them. You know, there's lots of different setups that you can use for the C3, lots of different options that you can run. You can run it, for example, you could run it with rear trailing arms, or you could set it up as a linked setup, such as the Silver Squatch did, or my buddy from down south who also runs a RC Speedy C chassis. His is a C2. However, the chassis design is very similar, and his was far more capable than mine when I went out on my initial testing and tuning day for the C3. I was out there with him, and I noticed that he was far more capable of hitting hard lines in his C2 than I was in my C3, and really all of that comes down to tuning. Testing, tuning, going on the bench, figuring things out, and then getting back out on the rock and seeing if the things that you screwed around with help or hurt the performance. Whereas the VS4-10 Phoenix legitimately is an out-of-the-box contender for some pretty difficult terrain. As you can see here, that was not an easy V-notch to make it up there at the top, and the Vanquish made quick work of it, something I would not have anticipated a relatively stock truck to be able to accomplish. Now, I will say the VS4-10 Phoenix isn't completely stock. I am running Rock Pirate's rear shock towers on the VS4-10 Phoenix. That was actually a setup that was on the truck already when I got it from West Desert Wheeler or Logan. If you haven't checked out his channel, I definitely recommend that you do. But yeah, those came on the truck when I purchased it, and I've just left them on there. I do think that they help with the rear articulation pretty significantly, especially when compared to a stock VS4-10 Phoenix. But in this case, we can basically say that it's an equivalent to a box stock Phoenix. Obviously, the width is much different than that of if you were running the stock Vanquish wheels that come in the kit. But you know, in this particular comparison, I don't know how much of a difference that's making. Although I will say, width probably is making the difference, particularly here on this obstacle. I think having just a bit more width, being able to stem between that right face, that passenger face, and the driver's side, that left face, being able to stem between the two faces there definitely made it much easier for the Phoenix to make it up and over this obstacle. Although I will say, I think at the end of the day, it's the top heaviness of the C3 on this particular climb that's making it difficult. Now, it almost makes it up every time, but I wasn't able to figure out a way to get it to actually make it up to the top of this line, and I do attribute that just to the top heaviness of this cage. Now, as I was saying, there are definitely ways to address this, ways to tune this truck to make it a bit more competitive, or at least compare to the Phoenix in terms of capability a bit more. So I will be trying to do that. I will be trying to tune and really fine-tune the RC Speedy C3 to get its performance as close to this Vanquish VS4-10 Phoenix as I possibly can. But it's going to take some time, and that's kind of the overarching principle I'm trying to get to with what I'm saying, is that the Phoenix is meant to just perform out of the box. You can obviously still modify it, still adjust it, still make it better, but the C3 is more of a builder's project. It's something where I would certainly say if you're looking at getting one just because it looks awesome, that's great. But keep in mind that that's why you're buying it, right? If you're buying it because it looks awesome, it does. It looks totally awesome. The C3 is a really rad-looking truck. But in terms of performance, you better anticipate putting some time in if you want to get the performance out of the rig. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned about people that are buying the C3 expecting incredible ascending and descending capabilities straight out of the box. Those who are getting into a steel or a titanium tube chassis probably know what they're up against when it comes to weight and the way that weight impacts performance of our scale rigs. But I figured that this would be kind of a fun comparison either way, just to see the differences between the two, and kind of with no real tuning on the C3, see just how it compares to its companion that it is kind of based off of here, the VS4-10 Phoenix. Now, this is really not a particularly difficult climb. The problem here again is weight, I think, more than anything. I think having just a bit more weight down low in the front there would probably help. I am looking at getting some brass to throw on this, although I'm not sure if Vanquish is making brass for these particular axles yet. I'm fairly certain that they're making brass for the F10T axles, but I don't know about these standard portal axles yet, so I'm going to have to look into that. If someone knows, you can leave it down in the comment section down below. I'd certainly be interested in picking some brass up, as it does need a bit more weight down low. The wheel or the tire, the spare tire in the back, is probably also not helping with our weight situation. You can see I'm taking a different line here than I did in the Phoenix. We're modifying this one just to see if we can make it up. I spent a while trying to get the truck to comply through that left-hand line, and I just couldn't quite get it to work. Also, it was a bit terrifying because the line is very exposed. There's about a 15-foot drop off on the driver's side here, so you certainly don't want to slip and have the truck fall and not be able to catch it. So I didn't want to go with that far left line because it creates even more exposure for the truck, so I decided to take this more safe approach on the right hand side. Also, I figured that this would give me the best opportunity to get up and over right here, as it is a pretty nasty ascent on the left hand side. So the Speedy makes it up with a slightly modified line on that one. This line here I put together just as a kind of test for side hilling and transition performance. The Phoenix really makes quick work of this transition, but you can see from this angle here, it is a fairly significant side hill that we're on still at this point, and it's just starting to level out right there and make its transition onto the flat. We got to make our way up and over one more little hump and settle back down into the notch down below, and the Phoenix really has no trouble whatsoever. Now, I had to put the GoPro down for the C3 version of this line because I really needed to concentrate and be able to use both hands. You can actually see the controller just off screen there. You can see it on the left-hand side, but I managed to kind of modify this line to get through the first two dips without tipping over, but that third and final dip, you can see there, I ended up having to catch the C3 and push it back onto its wheels. It just didn't have the ability to stay planted through there. Again, that top heaviness really biting it. This line here, kind of a simple turn and burn. You got to make a hard right-hand turn, cut into the wall, and then make your way up and over the wall. There is a nasty hole that you can't see too well, but you can see the truck kind of making its way into that hole. So I'm going to take a quick reverse here in the VS4-10 Phoenix and use that reverse to try to avoid the hole. Now you can see by doing that, I've actually put the rear passenger tire in a hole, which is not what I was looking for, so I'm going to have to back up here and take a new approach. You can see I put that passenger in that little wedge rock there to try to get the rear passenger to follow it, and I end up actually stemming over the hole instead of trying to make my way past it on the passenger side of it. That worked out well for me, and once I assessed the line and I got it figured out, it really wasn't too difficult at all. Now we're going to take a look at the RC Speedy's performance through this first section here. The C3 really not struggling too much at all, even though that is quite a significant vertical. As long as the traction is good and there aren't any significant ledges or changes in vertical angle, it really does pretty well. It's just when it has to make its way up ledges, or like in this situation, if there's changes to that vertical angle in which throw it off balance, then we start to see some issues with the C3. But we're going to try the same line here, backing up, trying to line up that rear tire and get it to follow that little wedge rock right in the middle. You can see it's making its way over the ledge on the bottom, but I get sucked into that hole, and where the Phoenix was able to kind of float its way up and over that hole, the C3 is just having a doozy of a time. It has such ridiculous articulation that it just falls straight into that hole and isn't able to recover. Now there, I actually almost lost the C3 off this ledge, which would have been a pretty gnarly fall, but I managed to catch it. But yeah, I was not able to make it up that second portion of the ascent. Now here, something a little bit different that we haven't seen yet this video, a descent. The VS4-10 Phoenix really doesn't have too much trouble with it, but you can see there at the bottom that it did kind of hop and skip, and I think that is due to the lightweight aspect of these Lexan body rigs. One thing I've noticed when it comes to descents is having a little bit of extra weight actually does kind of help sometimes, depending on where that weight is. Also, something that you couldn't really do with a Lexan body is what I'm doing here, which is just wedge yourself up against the rock, right? I mean, if you're trying to slow yourself down, use the body as a brake. So there, I'm actually basically slamming that tube chassis up against the rock wall, using it as a hand brake of sorts, and the Speedy actually made that descent look far more composed than the Phoenix did. Now we're going to take a look here. This is the last line that we're going to be looking at, and it starts off with a nice little stem over a small crack, nothing too major, and then you've got to make your way across this or around this left-hand or driver's side turn, and you really have to watch where you're putting your driver's side tires. I'm going to pan over to that side, and you can see here that you really want to put your tires right on that ledge, right on the edge of falling into that hole there that you can see. And the reason you want to do that is it allows the truck to get just a little bit more bite on those driver's side tires, stopping it from flipping over as you make that turn on a fairly significant side hill. Now we're going to work our way through this really cool looking tunnel here, and then we'll run over and grab the exit here. I do eat shit on the way over, so that's kind of fun. If you wanted to know why I stared at the sky for a moment, it wasn't because I was just in awe of its beauty, although it is really nice bluebird day out here in West Wendover, but it is totally because I slipped and fell and ate some mud. Throwing it in dig here, giving it a little bit of dig so we can get a tight turn. This is one of those lines that I am actually not, well, most lines are lines that I'm not particularly good at, but this is one that I've practiced a lot and I still just really can't quite get down. You need to throw the truck and dig and make a very, very, very tight passenger turn to come up and out of that tunnel. So let's see if I struggle in the Phoenix. Let's see what it looks like in the C3. That was totally driver struggle, though. However, I will say that wasn't the truck struggling. That was just me struggling. So that's not a good sign for the Speedy. I'm sorry, Speedy. I really trying to give you the best odds possible, but I'm just not the greatest driver. So you're gonna have to deal with that. But making our way up this section here, you can see we're starting to lose traction on that front axle, but I was able to use just a little bit of wheel speed and pull it back in. Did manage to make it up and over that ascent. Now, if there were cones there or gates there, I don't know if I would have hit them. I may have hit them in the C3, whereas the Phoenix felt a bit more composed. But either way, both trucks were able to make it up and over that ascent. Going through the cool little tunnel here, and then we are going to run over, make sure that we don't slip. I actually got this angle here, kind of like this one for the C3. Wish I would have gotten it for the Phoenix. And really using this angle to be able to tell how far to the driver's side I can push the truck over into the tunnel. Trying to get it as far into the driver's side of this tunnel as I possibly can before I throw it in dig. You can see there that little jolt, me throwing it in dig, and I didn't get far enough forward. You can tell because that rear tire is slipping back down into the tunnel. So trying to get a different position on it before I throw it in dig for a second time here. I get this tire up and over the ledge, which is a precarious position to put it in. And from there, deciding to throttle out, and it didn't work out too well for me. All right, folks, that's all I have for you today. Unfortunately, with that last slam, I don't know if you noticed, but I was actually turned when I slammed into the ground, which, if you don't know, on a tube chassis that weighs somewhere between 10 and 12 pounds, if you slam into the ground and you're pointing your wheels at the ground, that steering servo is going to say goodbye, especially if it's a cheap Chinese one. So, unfortunately, I lost the steering servo on that impact, but I do want to go back and do this all over again once I've spent a little bit more time tuning and playing around with the RC Speedy C3. I do think that it's a far more capable platform than I showed off in this video. So please don't let this video turn you off to one if you do want to purchase one. I absolutely love mine. I love the process of building it, and I really, really enjoy throwing a 4S battery pack in it and ripping it around. It's super, super fun, but I do believe that it is capable of more on the hard lines than what I'm giving it credit for. We just need to spend some time getting down into the nitty-gritty and figuring out what I can do to improve the performance. So over the next few months, I'm going to be working on that, and there will be update videos on the channel here and there, and then we'll try to go through, do this comparison again, and see if we can get some different results. As always, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this on the channel every single week. Head over to highnoonhobby.com/shop and check out some of the merch that we have on there to support the channel. And until next time, I hope you enjoy some hard lines, maybe some scale trails, and we'll see you out there. Cheers.